What if a clue to modern crime rates was hidden inside an ancient text? Sounds like the start of a movie, right? But it's actually the real-life premise of this incredible data study we're going to dive into.
You know, we all get how the seasons can change our mood. We talk about the winter blues or that summer energy. But this goes way deeper. What if it's not just about summer and winter? What if our behavior is shaped by, well, more subtle cycles? Ones that are tied to the very specific holy periods of the Islamic lunar calendar?
So you're probably wondering, why that calendar specifically? I mean, what would even make someone think to look there? Well, the whole spark for this investigation? It all started with just one single mysterious line in the Quran.
Right there in the text, there's this oath, by the 10 nights. But here's the thing, it never says which 10 nights. And that mystery, that's what got the researchers thinking. What is so special about these 10 nights that they're sworn upon in Scripture?
So for centuries, scholars have debated this, and they've basically narrowed down the possibilities to three main suspects. And boom, just like that, the study had its focus. Let's get to know these three specific time frames that were put under the microscope.
Okay, so first up, we've got al-Hijjah. This is a huge deal. It's the time of the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. The spiritual focus is just intense. Worship, prayer, fasting, all of it. It's all about outward devotion, and the key theme to remember here, sacrifice.
Next, there's Muharram. Now, this is one of 4 sacred months where fighting is traditionally forbidden. So you can think of it as this bubble of peace in the calendar, a time that's all about reverence, serenity, and feeling secure.
And the last one, it's the final 10 days of Ramadan, which is a huge spiritual high point. This stretch includes the Night of Power, which is believed to be just overflowing with blessings. The whole vibe is just deep tranquility, forgiveness, and finding relief from hardship.
All right, so you've got these 3 special periods. How in the world do you test a hypothesis like this? Well, the basic idea was, hey, if these periods really do have an effect on people, we should be able to see a tiny blip, a faint signal in public data. To find it, you got to go big, so let's check out how they set this thing up.
So they went big. They grabbed public crime data from 10 totally different places all over the US and Canada. We're talking huge cities like LA and Chicago, Vancouver up in Canada, and even data from UNC Chapel Hill. The whole point was to see if there was a pattern that held up everywhere, not just some weird one-off thing in one city.
And the way they crunched the numbers was actually beautifully simple. Okay, step 1. They pulled out the crime data for just those 3 10-day periods. Then, step 2, they figured out the average number of crimes per day inside each of those windows. And finally, step 3, they just compared that number to the average for the rest of the entire year. Clean, simple, and super effective.
Okay, so this is the moment of truth. What happened when they ran all the numbers? Well, it wasn't a simple yes or no. It was way weirder. The data showed 2 totally opposite realities. And this is where the story gets really, really interesting.
Let's look at finding number 1. And it was a total surprise. For one of these holy periods, crime didn't go down. It actually went up.
Just look at this table. This is for the first 10 days of al-Hijjah. See all those plus signs? In 9 out of the 10 cities they looked at, the daily crime rate was actually higher than the yearly average.
And get this, the data from UNC Chapel Hill showed the biggest spike of all, a 14.37% increase. I mean, that's not a small number. That's a serious jump.
So you're probably thinking, wait, so these holy periods mean more crime? Not so fast. Because for the other 2 periods, Muharram and Ramadan, the whole thing completely flipped. Crime didn't go up. It went down.
And here's where you see that flip. I mean, look at this data from Muharram. It's a sea of negative numbers, right? 7 out of the 10 spots saw a drop in crime. Oakland saw a drop of almost 20%. But hold on, because this next one is the real showstopper. The last 10 days of Ramadan at UNC Chapel Hill, a 32.68% drop in crime. Let that sink in for a second. The daily crime rate fell by almost a third. That is just wow.
Okay, so what is going on here? 1 period, crime goes up. 2 periods, crime goes down. How do you even begin to explain that? Well, the author of the study has a theory, and it brings us right back to where we started, the spiritual meaning of these days.
So check this out. It's actually pretty wild. On one side, you've got Muharram and Ramadan. Remember their themes? Peace, forgiveness, sanctuary. And what happened in the data? A decrease in crime. Kind of makes sense, right? But then there's al-Hijjah. its main theme is sacrifice, and the data showed an increase in crime. Now, the study doesn't say why that connection exists, but the correlation is just fascinating. The numbers seem to echo the spiritual themes in both directions.
So, after all that, from an ancient text to a massive data crunch to this wild theory, what's the big picture? What do we take away from all this? Let's zoom out for a second.
So, to wrap it all up, this whole investigation started with a line from the Quran, and what it found across 10 different cities were these really consistent but totally opposite patterns in crime. Crime ticked up during one holy period, and it dropped during 2 others. And the author's theory is that these statistical shifts kind of line up with the whole spiritual vibe of those specific times.
Okay, so let's get right to it. We see all this data, right? Studies, statistics, and they're fascinating, for sure, but it all really boils down to one big question. Is any of this stuff actually useful in our daily lives? I mean, can knowing about a pattern, like, say, a potential spike in crime or social friction, actually lead to real-world action? Could it really help us build, preventative programs for people at risk? Or maybe just enhance security right when we need it most?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because this data, it doesn't just point to a problem. It actually lights up 2 very different paths forward. Think of it like a fork in the road for how a society could respond. So, on one side, you have what's called civic resource allocation. This is basically the top-down approach. The action is direct. You increase police patrols and tighten urban controls during that specific high-risk period we talked about. And the focus? It's all about deploying specific precautions, like giving extra protection to witnesses or other vulnerable people. In short, the state steps in to protect its citizens based on a data-backed prediction. But that's only one way to go. On the other side, you have community self-regulation. And this is a totally fascinating bottom-up approach. Here, the action isn't about external control, it's about internal motivation. It suggests promoting the theological practice of fasting. And the focus here is just brilliant. It reframes fasting not just as an act of worship, but as a psychological tool. The whole idea is to use it as a way to modify behavior, to help individuals self-regulate during these exact same high-risk periods. So you see, the same data can lead to 2 completely different game plans. One is external and led by the state, and the other is internal and driven by the community itself. And this really brings us to the most crucial point. The ultimate takeaway is summed up perfectly in this quote from the source material. It says that the data itself isn't the solution. It's a doorway. It gives us the evidence, it shows us the options, but it doesn't make the decision for us. That responsibility, the choice of whether to go with civic action or community self-regulation, or maybe even a mix of both, well, that's now entirely up to us. And that's really something to think about.